1900 years, heresy sown. Truth was twisted, its seeds were grown. Break the lies, spark the mission. Welcome to Quranic Inquisition.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Peace of the Lord to all of you. Shalom, assalamu alaikum, namaste. Welcome to this show. Today is going to be a little bit different to what we've done before. Today we are not presenting our research, but a friend's research. You have him here on the screen right now, and you will see as well his tag from YouTube in pretty much the majority of the slides. So make sure that if you like this content, that you go to his channel, show him some love, and most of his videos are actually in Hebrew, so it would be a little bit difficult, but they're as well like quite short, so you can always use subtitles in a particular topic that you are interested in. And hopefully quite soon as well, he will come over and then do these presentations himself. Now he's been very busy and he's going to be busy for the next couple of weeks. So instead of just waiting longer in order to have this presentation, we decided to just go ahead. We asked for his permission. He was cool with it. So that's what we will be doing today. With us, as always, Cash. Hello, Cash. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, JC?
I'm good. Are you looking forward to seeing what stories in the Quran could come from?
Well, it comes from Allah, obviously, but I'm still interested in what we have to see.
Yeah, well played. Well, so let's have a look. In theory, we should have actually started this show talking like about the Talmud, because some of the stories that are in the Quran happen to be in the Talmud, but that's not our area of expertise. So we will have our friend to talk about those when he's available, and actually he pops around. Little name that I have actually added there at the bottom, just so that I would remember, is Professor Uri Rubin. Some of these finds and some of the things that we're going to discuss, some of them that will be on his works of the late professor. I have actually checked some of his articles and his finds, and they were actually quite cool, including talking sometimes about sentences in the Quran which make no sense and trying to figure them out, seeing if they are idioms or where they come from. So it was quite interesting. But for now, let's just discuss three stories that appear in the Quran and they are quite confusing and we don't know where they come from. Normally, we think about the stories in the Quran being from the pseudo Gospels, particularly the Infancy Gospel. That's the one that we all know about Jesus speaking from the cradle and these sort of things. And then other stories, such as the sleepers in the cave, we know where that comes from, and the one from about Alexander the Great. But are there any other stories? Well, I think the answer is very solidly yes. And let's go over three of them like right now, without further ado. Adam and the angels. So, Tash, would you like to start talking about this wonderful Quranic story that, as you said, it certainly 100% comes from Allah?
hmm So for this one, we'll first start by reading out the verse in question. This is going to be in Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 30 to 33. We're using Daif International for the translation here, which means Say International. And when your Lord said to the angels, indeed, I will make upon the earth a successive authority, they said, will you place upon it one who causes corruption therein and sheds blood, while we declare your praise and sanctify you? Allah said, indeed, I know that which you do not know. So this is the question of whether or not God will create Adam. And then we continue reading. And he taught Adam the names, all of them. Then he showed them to the angels, presumably the animals, and said, inform me of the names of these if you are truthful. So God, or Allah here, is challenging the angels to say the names, which Adam knows because he was taught them by Allah in this reading here. We continue. They said, exalted are you. We have no knowledge except what you have taught us. Indeed, it is you who is the knowing the wise, or the wise knower. The final part here. He said, "O Adam, inform them of their names." And when he had informed them of their names, he said, "Did I not tell you that I know the unseen aspects of the heavens and the earth, and I know what you reveal and what you have concealed?" Well, there's a couple things I just want to point out. One thing that just came to mind while I was reading is, well, at this point there is no humans in the earth, right? And the animals were created after Adam. Is that correct? JC, do you know more than me? Maybe, I don't know. Is
Well,
Adam
you're
first?
actually jumping. You're jumping the gun a bit because at this point is taught the names, but we actually don't know what the names are, which is
Okay,
something one could read up.
yes,
The thing that actually
yes,
catches my eye is this final sentence when it says, "So he said," and then is going to be about Adam. So Allah said, "Oh Adam, inform them of their names." Okay, but then it continues, and when he Adam had informed them of their names, he said. And he's like, okay, so you have to assume that it has changed within the same sentence from he, Adam, to he, God, because otherwise
mm,
Adam would be saying, did I not tell you that I know the unseen? And obviously that creates major problems. But, the Quran is very, very clear.
right. But the he could be, is consistent. He said, "Oh Adam, inform them of their names," and then it continues. He once again is talking about God. "Did I not tell you that I know the unseen aspects?" What are you saying that this is Adam speaking according to the sin in the second part, or
I'm
is it
saying that
God?
it should have been more clear because it says within
Right.
the same sentence, when he, and in that case that he means Adam, had informed them of their names, then he, Allah, said. And it's like, yeah, when you are making something very, very clear, it should really be clear. I mean, in English, we would have the capital H for he, and then you can tell them apart. But I don't think that is a feature in Arabic, Syriac,
Right.
or in
Of
other
course not.
languages. So.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to point out is the fact that basically you have angels saying, "Will he shed blood before the creation of blood?" There is no blood yet. Adam is not created yet. So that's why I asked about whether the animals were created before Adam, but no, the animals were created after Adam, right? Unless I'm wrong about that. But anyway, that's just a small point of how could this be God if it's talking about shedding blood according to the angels when blood yet not exists. But so yeah, we have this story. There's a couple things in here that sort of seem weird, like they don't make sense. And Christian Prince talks about this, about how why is it the angels that are somehow at fault here? If God teaches Adam the names, then Adam knows them, but then he goes to the angels and say, "Okay, tell me the names." And they say, "Well, you haven't taught us the names yet. How would we know them?" Well, that's the same thing with Adam. If according to the text here, as we're reading it, if Adam was not taught the names by Allah, he, as the angels would presumably, would also not know the names. So there seems to be some logical problem here. But maybe the
Yeah.
logical problem is not there in the original telling of the story potentially.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the Christian Prince says that because if God knows something and then he tells that to Adam, then it's not the unseen. It's like, yeah, you have just made it up. You've made up the words and said these are the names, and so that doesn't mean that you know the unseen. It means that you have just made up the names. So it's a logical problem. But let's see actually what the explanations are according to the tafsir.
Right. So the Tafsir writers elucidate us because they're here to make the Quran less confusing. So we read from Ibn Abbas, who totally existed, and he taught Adam all the names of all his progeny. All his progeny, that's a lot of names. We've got 7 billion people in the world now. Interesting. Or the names, or, right? Okay, so the names of all his progeny, or the names of all the beasts, right? And, so we have and here. So it's either all the names of the progeny, or it's the names of all of the beasts and other things, vague language, other things, including, and we get some specifics here, but they just make you laugh, a cooking pot, a plate, a saucer. Then showed them to prove that they were wrong to the angels, who were commanded to prostrate, saying, "Inform me of the names of these created beings and descendants, if you are truthful in your first claim." So Ibn Abbas is trying to help us here first.
Sorry, Cash, I think we just lost you there for a second. I don't know if we lost you or we lost me. Oh, you're muted. Now you're muted. Cash, are you there? Can you hear me? Okay, we seem to be having some technical difficulties. Bear with us. Okay, we're just trying to figure it out. Thank you, Graham. Okay, so it seems to be a problem at his end, and it shows, yes, that he's been muted, but I cannot unmute him. So we're having some technical difficulties. It's bound to happen every once in a while. We haven't had these for some time.
Hello?
Well, yeah, Cash, now you're back. Welcome back.
Test, test, test.
Yes, we can hear you. Oh, you have gone muted again. I think you need to probably do some quick restart. Cash, I think you can probably hear me while you do your restart and then come back. I will just explain something related to this particular story with the tafsir. Let's see if it holds. I see that you are trying to talk.
Test,
Cash,
test, test. Hello?
yes, now we can hear you again. Oh, and Cash is gone. Okay. While we wait for him to return, let me just tell a little story about this. Many years ago, before I had any interest in Islamic affairs, a friend of mine, a Muslim, said, I asked him, tell me something about your religion, because I have no idea about Islam. And he said, in Islam, we believe that that God taught Adam the names of all of his descendants. That includes you, includes me, includes everybody. And, I was not really paying attention, so I just nodded along and I said, okay, fine, cool, whatever. Now, years later, when I actually picked up the Quran and I read it, and I came with the with this, I came across this verse that talks about taught Adam the names. It became then very clear that okay, this is what my friend actually said, and they believe that God taught Adam the names of everybody. Now, the problem is that if you read then the Quran in detail, let me actually just go back to the previous slide. It says that after, this is on the second verse, and he taught Adam the names, all of them, then he, Allah, showed them to the angels. So he showed something. What did he show? He cannot be showing names. He should be showing what? People? Did he have like some holographic thing and said, who is this? Who is this? It just felt weird that that was phrased in that manner. I think that's the reason why when we get to the actual sources, or rather the tafsir, when they're trying to explain it, they need to have these very weird caveats. Like in this case, that from Ibn Abbas, God taught Adam the names of all his progeny, and then or these other things. It's like, no, hang on a minute, don't tell me that he did this thing or that thing. Tell me exactly what it was. And when you go through the tafsir writers, you will find that a lot, where they don't actually agree on the explanation on a very specific thing. 1 second, let me actually just see if Cash is ready to join. Okay, we're going to try something else. Oh no, okay. Cash, you're back. Are you back?
Hello?
Yeah, you seem to be back.
Yes, but I can't hear you now.
So how are you responding if you cannot
As in,
hear
I
me?
can't hear you through my headphones. It's on phone speaker. Sorry. I'm gonna mute myself for a second. One moment.
Okay, so I'll continue with that. So that was the weird thing. We read the Quran and we have this problem right in there to do with what did God teach Adam and what is going on with the angels. And the tafsir writers, they just don't know. It's almost like they're trying to first find the sources from other accounts, as we're going to see right now, but also they are trying to explain the words that are in the Quran. And in the Quran, it says he showed them, the angels, something. So it has to be something physical. So the answer to this is found here. So it's one of these Talmudic stories, and we will leave that one on screen for a little bit, so you can actually read at your leisure and also find it. It's found in Bereshit Rabbah 17, and it is as simple as the Lord God, formed from the ground every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens, and brought them to the man Adam to see what he would call it. And whatever the man would call every living creature, that was its name. So it's simply the account of God telling Adam, here are the animals, you name them, and that's that. When we contrast that with the verses in the Quran, we see that the tafsir writers, or rather the tafsir writers, their early imams and scholars, they had those verses, but they didn't have the full picture. Unless there is some words in there that are mistranslated, and Cash and I we still need to find, it looks more like there were stories, but instead of writing down in this Quran everything, they just wrote some very small bits and pieces of the information, and the audience, they knew the full picture. So somebody, if that story was actually read to a Jew who is actually familiar with, for example, the Talmudic stories, he would immediately know, okay, yeah, I know the full story. This is just an abbreviated version. So I think that's actually quite clear as to how it would happen. Although in the next sessions is when we will try to um, speculate as to how these stories, they are not only from the Talmud, there are other sources, like we're going to see as well in just a second, where how they would actually make it all the way into the Quran. There are so many sources, so we will see.
And
So the next
JC,
one is, yes.
JC, can you go back? I would like to comment because
Mm,
on that, yeah, because you already pointed out, right, how there's this distinction, right, as in this narrative, this story exists essentially, the bare bones of it, as in it is very clearly derivative of the same place, as in this is the source for this story in the Quran most likely. However, there's a huge contrast, which one is illogical, one is logical, which is what we're seeing in front of us here, right? It does make sense to say that Adam was presented the animals and he named them, and so it is, right? Not that God taught him the names and then he knows them, but then God asked the angels without teaching them and they don't know, and that's how somehow that, you know, they're lesser than Adam because of that, or something like this, right? There's a clear logical problem, which is why the tafsir authors have to then, you know, provide their explanations. But this source is coherent, right? This narrative here that we're seeing is actually quite cool and profound, and we see then later, if you read through all of this, you can pause and read through all of it. At the end, it's very cool how it says basically, you know, and what is my name? God asked Adam. He says, your name is Lord, as you are the Lord over all these creatures, right? And then, oh, and therefore, the name of God is now Adonai, right? It's kind of endearing. It's an endearing story, the whole thing together. The idea of, you know, human beings being distinct from angels in this particular capacity. It's not sure exactly what it's pointing at, but it's pointing at something coherent. On the other hand, the story is definitely, uh, you know, pulled into the Quran in some form or another. However, the current reading of it is totally incoherent. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, so that was just wanted to add that.
Yeah, it's a thank you for that, Cash. It's a shame that our friend Shai from You Reads Quran is not here, because I would have asked him if there is another source. Somehow, when I spoke with him about these sources, probably about 6 months ago, I think he mentioned that the same story appears elsewhere, where God asks Adam to name the animals, but every time that he actually names something, that was already the name decided by God. It's almost like reading this by almost like reading too much into it. If every time that Adam says this is the name of the ant and the bird and so on, and that was its name, it could also be interpreted as it had been decided beforehand and the knowledge was like transferred from God to Adam because the name was already decided. as in Adam, did Adam make the decision and then God accepted, or did God have already the names basically created and then somehow transfer that knowledge to Adam, or basically he knew the future, he knew what he was going to call them. So these are the sort of things that you could have a very nice philosophical question about, philosophical debate about. But when we take all of that into account and read it back into the Quran, it starts to make sense, something that the tafsir writers couldn't actually make sense of. So let's move on to the next topic, and that one is the fall of Satan. This one is an interesting one because the Quran is, well, we will see what the Quran says. So we have these two verses. These ones are from Taif International, as usual. So, and when it says this, that's Surah 2, verse 34. And when we said to the angels, prostrate before Adam, so they prostrated, except for Iblis. He refused and was arrogant and became of the disbelievers. Now, in Surah 15, verses 23 to 33, there should have been a dash there, sorry for that. And when your Lord said to the angels, I will create a human being out of clay from an altered black mud. And when I have proportioned him and breathed into him of my soul, then fall down to him in prostration. So the angels prostrated, all of them entirely, except, once again, Iblis. He refused, he refused to be with those who prostrated. Allah said, O Iblis, what is the matter with you that you are not with those who prostrate? He said, Iblis said, never would I prostrate to a human whom you created out of clay from an altered black mud. By the way, this black mud thing is problematic, but that's for another time. So these are the verses that are beginning to describe what happens to Adam, except that we don't really have a full picture. And as we are giving away with the title here, Apocrypha in the Quran, this story seems to be borrowed from a different source. Let's have a look and see what we find.
So the source that we find for this is this life of Adam and Eve. It's also known in the Greek version as Apocalypse of Moses. It's a Jewish pseudo-biographical group of writings. It recounts the lives of Adam and Eve, from the fall to the expulsion from the garden of Adam and Eve to their deaths. It provides more detail about the fall of man, including Eve's version of the story, which is very interesting. Satan explains that he rebelled when God commanded him to bow down to Adam. After Adam dies, he and all his descendants are promised a resurrection. So this is the source we're reading from here. We start from 11:2 in the numbering here, where it says, she cried out, saying, woe to you, devil! For what reason do you fight against us? What concern do you have with us? What have we done to you should you persecute us so grievously? Why does your malice extend to us? So it's this calling out to Satan, why are you doing this? Did we ever take your glory or cause you to be without honor? Why do you persecute us, O enemy, impiously and jealously unto death? Groaning, the devil said. So here's the devil's response. Why is he persecuting them? O Adam, all my enmity, jealousy, and resentment is towards you, since on account of you I was expelled and alienated from my glory, which I had in heaven in the midst of the angels. On account of you I was cast out upon the earth. Okay, so it makes a lot of sense then, right? So it's pointing to, basically, the devil's giving a justification. So something happened between Adam and the devil such that he was kicked out of heaven. Okay, that's established from the source. Fair enough. Then we continue. Adam answered, what have I done to you? So he's asking, because Adam isn't familiar with what's going on here, because he was still presumably the lifeless clay, or very nascent. He didn't observe all these events happen. What fault do I have against you, since you have not been harmed nor injured by us? Why do you persecute us? The devil answered, Adam, what are you saying to me? On account of you I was cast out of heaven. When you were formed, I was cast out from the face of God, which is like the glory of God, and sent forth from the company of the angels. When God blew into you the breath of life, and your countenance and likeness were made in the image of God, Michael led you and made you worship in the sight of God. The Lord God then said, Behold, Adam, I have made you in our image and likeness. So we have this story here. It's very reminiscent of what we just sort of, well, we haven't actually looked at it yet, huh? Well, we did, I guess. Yeah, we did. But
Well,
so
I have highlighted these bits in yellow because the Quran actually uses a very similar expression when it says within the same story connected with Satan. A moment before, within these verses, it says, "I breathed into you, from my spirit," and in here we have something like similar. So they seem to be quite connected. I think it's worth as well mentioning that this apocryphal is actually a apocryphal book. It's very easy to read. It's very short and it's quite interesting. So it's not something difficult like the Monday Book of John or something like that, the Mandean Book of John. So this one is certainly worth a read if you're interested about seeing some of these sources. If you find anything else like within the whole text that happens to be in the Quran, let us know, and then we can actually show it to the public as well. That would be interesting. But these ones, they actually are quite paralleled to the stuff that we previously read from the Quran itself. Kash, you're muted, or
oh yeah, my bad.
okay.
We continue reading from chapter 14, same source. Having gone forth, Michael called all the angels, saying, Worship the image of the Lord God, just as the Lord God has commanded, where Adam is the image of the Lord God. Michael himself worshipped first, and then he called me and said, Worship the image of God Jehovah. I answered, this is then the devil speaking, right? I do not have it within me to worship Adam. When Michael compelled me to worship, I said to him, Why do you compel me? I will not worship him who is lower and posterior to me. I am prior to that creature. Before he was made, I had already been made. He ought to worship me. We continue. Hearing this, the other angels who were under me were unwilling to worship him. Michael said, Worship the image of God. If you do not worship, the Lord God will grow angry with you. So this is a lot, very much so what we were reading in the Quran, right? You can see how all of the details map up. You have the casting out of Iblis, or the devil, from the presence of God amidst his angels, on account of Adam's creation, and then the compelling of worship to the image of the Lord God, which is Adam, and the devil refuses. And that's then what we see one for one in the Quranic narrative. What do you think, Jose?
I think that when we actually read the section from the Quran, there is this part just before they are telling of to Iblis that you have to add in brackets, Allah said, "O Iblis, what is the matter with you that you are not with those who prostrate?" You have to add Allah in the brackets. So it makes me wonder whether originally that was meant to be, is it Michael in here? Um,
Yes, it's
Yes,
Michael here, yeah.
and instead of Michael, they have pretty much just have to remove that because now you have the story of an angel asking another angel to prostrate, and that wouldn't actually work. And in any case, the name Allah doesn't happen to be there. It is implied through the whole thing, so it feels like they tried to just take this story and just change it a little bit. Because why would an angel tell another angel to prostrate? That would be the job of God directly. So it looks like the parallels are entirely there. They just change a couple of things to make it more about God giving the command as opposed to the angel. But everything seems to be almost very closely related.
Yeah, so this is then the two actually are linked, right? The first story about the naming and this, they're the same kind of general time frame. Both stories about Adam, both stories about the relationship between Adam and the angels. So we have these sources then from the Jewish literature, from Apocrypha, Talmud alike, and we see these stories then pretty clearly, I would say, represented then in the Quran. So we continue actually with our source here. We start now in chapter 15, verse 3. I'm guessing that's the numbering. Said, If he grows angry with me, I will place my seat above the stars of heaven, and I will be like the Most High. So this is the pride setting in, right? Then the Lord God grew angry with me and sent me forth with my angels from our glory. On account of you, we were expelled from our dwelling into this world and cast out upon the earth. Immediately we were in grief, since we had been despoiled of so much glory, and we grieved to see you in such a great happiness of delights. By a trick I cheated your wife, and caused you to be expelled through her from the delights of your happiness, just as I had been expelled from my glory. So this is the justification also now from the perspective of the devil, according to this apocryphal source, as to why he, which is the serpent then, that linkage comes later, but why he decided to lure and seduce Eve to eat of the apple and disobey God. And the reason why is because he blames them for the exact same consequence happening to him.
Victim mentality, pretty much. So one of the things that I was really impressed by having the discussion with Shai, and when he brought this up, is that this is not even a very obscure story from the Talmud that only a handful of people know. This is an actual apocryphal story. You can actually find it online right now. That's actually as well what, when he sent me the link, you go, you Google it, you get it, you can read it. It's not a very obscure apocryphal story. Yet when we engage either with Muslims or with Christian apologists or these people, everybody would just be aware of just a handful of the stories where they come from. The pseudo gospel, the infancy gospel, I mean, the sleepers in the cave, and the thing with Alexander the Great, which is just a piece of propaganda. That's all, those three. But there are other sources, like this one should have been discussed exactly in the same manner. Certainly, it looks like they have taken a lot of inspiration, to say the least, from it. And the changes can easily be explained by the fact that this is like from the 2nd century. So many versions would have actually existed. But I feel that this one is the version that eventually made it into the Quran as how or why Satan was actually expelled, except that all of the conversation between Satan and Adam and Eve is removed. But what happened actually in heaven between the angels being asked to prostrate and so on, those features are there. It's like they removed um, Satan speaking with Adam and Eve, in Mecca, which is a shame. They should have had it there. Then we would have Mecca appearing in the book twice, but that doesn't seem to be the case. All right, so should we go on to the third and last story?
Allah saving Pharaoh. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah, this one is very interesting, or at least I found it quite interesting, because when we read this in the Quran, so Surah Yunus, so 10, 90 to 92. 90 to 92, yes, Dave International right there. So, and we took the children of Israel across the sea. All right, so this is actually talking about crossing of the Red Sea. And Pharaoh and his soldiers pursued them in tyranny and enmity until when drowning overtook him, he's like, okay, him. So this is Pharaoh, it's not his men, it's Pharaoh. Pharaoh said, I believe that there is no deity that in whom the children except that in whom the children of Israel believe, and I am of the Muslims. Oh, lo and behold, Alexander the Great is a Muslim, Jesus is a Muslim, Ali is a Muslim, Moses is a Muslim, Pharaoh is a Muslim. Everybody has been a Muslim. It's quite easy to say that someone is a Muslim when you cannot prove, you cannot go and ask them. So
Yeah, when someone dies 5 centuries ago or 2,000 years ago, yeah, he was a Muslim. Let's wait for him to defend himself.
Aristocles was a Muslim, and Socrates, and Aristotle, everybody. So now, so after that, in the next verse, 91, now, and you had disobeyed before and were of the corrupters. So today, we, the heavens, the royal we for God, Allah, will save you in body, that you may be to those who succeed you a sign. And indeed, many among the people of our signs are heedless. Okay, so if you read this as it appears in the standard translations, before Cash and I, we take that one to pieces and find other stuff, it's saying that he gets saved. This is like very clearly saying that Pharaoh did not die. He repented. He said that he believed in the God of the children of Israel, and today we will save you in body, right? So that's what it says. However, the problem appears when we actually look at some sources. Let's have a look at the accounts in the Talmud, which they are actually mentioned in some of the tafsirs. So, come and see from Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who rebelled most grievously against the rock, the Most High. I know you like that title, the rock. That's not Dwayne Johnson, that's the other rock. Who is the Lord, that I should hearken unto his voice? In the same terms of speech in which he sinned, he repented, as it is said, Who is like thee, O Lord, among the mighty? The Holy One, blessed be he, delivered him from among the dead. Whence do we know what he died? Because it is said, For now I had put forth my hand and smitten thee. So he dead. Pharaoh dead. He very dead. Okay, so that's just what it is. Including in the Talmud is actually just spelled out in these very clear terms. And there is actually even more. And this was well interesting. When then we go, which one was this? The tafsir. So the Bible does not mention this happening, but the Talmud says explicitly that when he was drowning, he said, Who is like thee, O Lord, among the gods? So this is the passage that we have just read. So this tafsir writer, who I think, I can't remember the dates, but I think Shai said is one of the contemporary ones. He's not one of the ancient ones. But he actually goes to the Talmud and he reads exactly the same story that we have just read a moment ago. And then this section there, we left everything else in there for context. If the Pharaoh who was drowned by was Mineptah, who ruled over Egypt when Prophet Moses was sent to him, his embalmed dead body is still lying in the Cairo Museum, which is great. You know, you can go and visit. When Sir Grafton E. Smith removed the bandages from his mummy, a layer of salt was found on the body, which was a clear proof that he was drowned in the sea. So now we have a look at the tafsir, and this guy is saying, hey, you see, we don't know basically what happens. The Talmud clearly says that he died. It's like if you're writing a tafsir, you're supposed to have all of the knowledge through oral traditions and whatever it is that your prophet had said, because those stories had to come from some place. Or are you going to say that they didn't get these stories directly from Allah, but they just went to the Jews and the Christians and everybody else, and they asked them, hey, can you tell me the stories? If the stories came from God, well, the Muslims should know all of the stories without having to go to other sources and ask questions. But it looks like even the tafsir writers, they have to go and check. And that one is great because it actually gives the actual physical evidence of if that's the guy who is dead, well, we have it and he was drowned. So, rip. And we have other bits and pieces. I don't think I have any highlights in here. Let me just check. No. So this is actually just the end. When we have a look at other tafsir writers, they all try to explain it away because that's what tafsirs really are. So we just read the beginning of the first one from Ibn Abbas as well. See, the guy that totally existed. But this day we saved the in your body, in brackets. And that what actually means is that we save your dead body. We save your cadaver in its armor. And it's like, literally, it means the polar opposite, right? Or am I misinterpreting something as clearly as we save you in your body? It's like, no, that means that you are dead, but hey, you have your armor with you.
It's so
What do you
interesting
think,
because
Ash?
so the source comes from the source that essentially says that in the last moments, Pharaoh recognized the truth, yet he was still killed. Right? That's essentially the idea that he did recognize that Jehovah is the one and only God, yet he was still killed. So it's interesting how this the Quranic context here, where it seems to be. I haven't looked at the verse and looked under the Sin translations quite yet on this one, but it seems like they're almost kind of going further and saying like holier than thou. Like you guys believe that Pharaoh repented, yet was still killed. Well, we believe in the true God who would not kill someone who repented. Like that's like if I try to wrap my mind around why they would essentially pick from this source in a sense and yet change it, right? Because if they're taking from the source, take from the source, right? If you're taking from the source, then say, yeah, he repented, but he was still killed. You do not say something as explicit as he was. JC, what was it? The exact words?
Like, I don't know.
He was saved in body, something like this, right? Um,
Save thee in your body.
right. So in your body, thee is the soul. So how do you save someone in their body? Their soul doesn't leave their body, right? So anyway, there's so many problems, of course, here. And that's the first thing that comes to mind is that, like, hypothetically, that would be the line of reasoning to get from taking the source and yet changing it. And the thing about the Maududi, can you go back a slide? I just wanted to have a look at
Sure.
that Maududi commentary here, right? So imagine this, right? You have this verse in your holy book spoken by God Himself, and yet you have to wait until you get, I guess, like a British guy. I don't know what's the name. Grafton E. Smith. This Sir Grafton. This is a British dude, probably in the 1800s or 1900s, or maybe even early. I don't know when Maududi wrote, but it's some guy had to go over there and actually observe the cadaver of the pharaoh of the time for them to realize, okay, yes, he actually did die, right? Like because the verse suggests that he didn't die. Then you have tafsir writers trying to do explanations, and then you have someone going, "Oh yeah, we're going to appeal to this British dude who just, found that there's salt on the cadaver, and therefore he was drowned." Right? So we now know what Allah really meant because we have this Western dude. It's absurd. Like this is a religion. So yeah, that's how I just wanted to add that.
Orientalist, I believe they call them. But what I find it interesting is that they didn't simply go with what the Quran says, because that's what they normally do when they have this sort of like problem. I mean, the clear example is about Jesus, when they would say, well, these people, the Christians, say that he died, but actually no, he didn't. And why? Because there is one verse in the Quran that says they didn't crucify him. Therefore, that is what they have to believe. And there are obviously lots of other problems, like with the coins, like when they're talking about the dirhams and things like that. So there are quite a few problems. And what Muslims do is they point at the book and they says, no, our book is right, your sources are wrong. What would have made sense about this one is for them to have challenged this narrative. And to this day, all of the tafsir writers saying, no, no, that Pharaoh, he survived. Why? Because the book says that he was saved in the body. He's alive. It doesn't, I don't care if the Talmud says otherwise, and or if you found a mummy that says otherwise. They would do what they always do, to say, no, that's not the right mummy. This is another mummy. This is another guy. Is it probably maybe one of the soldiers? They got it confused, because this is the tactic that we see all the time. What really surprises me is that the Quran says one thing, and now they have to do the polar opposite, and they are trying to agree with the story from the Talmud first, as we see on this tafsir, and also from the historical account. That is almost unheard of. Normally, they just say all of those things are wrong and my book is right. But here they say, no, everything is right. It's just that you don't understand that saving someone in the body means he dead. There's a big problem there.
Right, saving the in your body means taking the lifeless corpse out of the water. Um, right, but even that
Yeah,
doesn't make sense because if he died from drowning, right, and you can visually see it be based on the salt content like below the skin or whatever the exact details were, I forgot on the source, right? But that wouldn't work if his body was taken out of the water because it takes time for that thing to manifest and be observed. So if it's just a quick drowning and then take his body out, doesn't work either. Anyway, so that's
yeah, I
interesting.
actually feel compelled. I have to actually tell a lie. You certainly have watched the film Infinity War, and there is this scene where Thor is trying to reforge this Stormbreaker, and he has to actually take the power. He has to take the heat of this dying star, and the forger, this dwarf, says, "But that energy will kill you." And Thor says, "Only if I die." And says, "Yes, that's what killing you means, or this is what die means, or something like that. This actually looks like the same. Like it's actually saying, on the one hand, it's explained that he's dead, but then it says, no, no, no. When it says that he was saved, it means that he was dead, but saved and in the body. And it's like, no, it actually literally means the polar opposite of what you are putting forward. So I find that actually quite curious. And it's something that we don't find a lot in the Quran. Normally, it is just this insistence of ignoring any other sources and saying the Quran is the truth. Doesn't really matter what other sources say. In this one is the opposite. It seems like they jump to bandwagon and then they try to say that the words mean something different, which is not the first time, all things considered.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
just hope
So
that if I ever want someone to save me, I hope they don't just like fling around my lifeless corpse. That's not what I meant when I said saved. That's not what I
yeah, it's
meant.
like, see, I saved you, and your funeral will be okay. So this is it. These are the three stories that we have for you today. Hopefully next time we'll have our friend Shai when he has more time. Hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how he's doing with his schedule. He's knee deep on research at the moment, as I understand it. So hopefully that will happen soon, and then he can talk about the Talmud and show us quite a few other stories. In fact, when I first spoke with him, he told me perhaps like 10 different stories, some in a lot of detail, some a little bit briefer just to move on, but lots of other stories that the Quran describes really poorly, like the thing about the names. You need to really go to the tafsir to see what is going on, and the tafsir writers, they already didn't know what to say about them. So there are lots of things like that. Some of these stories are very easy to show, some they are very complicated, and even with Shai, he had to actually say, look, I have to show lots of sources here because this one is a difficult one. So, but hopefully we will have him here over in the very near future, and then he can show these things, and that will help us plot in a map like where these stories were being told, and we can evidence a little bit better the origins of Islam, the region, the period, and all of those things. And this is just like the final slide that we have here. These are some of the stories that we have all heard of because Christian apologists, they talk about them all the time and so on. So we have the story about Mary and Zachariah, and that is from the Proto-Evangelium. In there you have the approximate date as to when those stories would have been written, certainly pre-Quran and certainly pre any notion of the religion. We have the whole thing about the clay birds from the Infancy Gospel of Thomas as well. You have the date there. The story of Dul Karnain, although there is a lot more to that story, but so far we will say it's a Syriac legend. And the sleepers in the cave as well. We know where that comes from. And then we have things like the night journey, where we can actually discuss for an age and a day. But there are similar stories within the Talmud about Abraham, about Moses, and people will just uh, basically decide on one or another. And there are other plausible explanations. However, I actually go for that one there in Shabbat 88b. So we have videos about it as well. A story that actually explains the night journey. So that one, whether that one is the correct one or not, it's actually starting to make the rounds on social media. The Christian Prince talks about it. Odon Lafontaine talks about it. Even David Booth has recently mentioned that it's all about Moses. So it looks like people are starting to look at some of these apocryphal stories or Talmudic stories and trying to find them in the Quran, and these happen to be there. So now we have seen about this thing to do with Allah teaching Adam the names, and now we see that that is probably quite likely from the Quran. The expulsion of Satan from paradise and the events around it from the life of Adam and Eve, which is an apocryphal book. We have Pharaoh's rescue, as well. We have there the reference where you can actually read all of that. And there are other things that we need to actually look into. These ones, I simply ask ChatGPT to just give me the answers. So maybe they're absolutely wrong. But one of the things that it actually said is the stories about Abraham's icons, they're actually found as well in the Talmud. I haven't
I can
actually
con
checked this one.
I
I,
can
I
con I
will
can
see.
confirm that. I can confirm
You
that.
can,
I've read those stories. Yes, they are in the Talmud.
okay.
Oh, I don't know if it's Talmud, but it's in the Jewish literature.
Okay, so maybe it's actually that reference. At least I did actually ask ChatGPT a bit. It means it has actually found it from people talking about these things, and even the stories of Joseph. from probably coming from the actual account of Joseph from Ephraim. However, I have also heard that they could have been from other sources like Talmudic stories and things like that. Hopefully, so those last two, they could actually be wrong. This is just ChatGPT giving the answer. But what I was trying to get at is that the information is out there, and people are starting to realize that there are other sources apart from the ones on the left-hand side that we've all heard about, except for the night journey, that there are other stories. And it does seem like it is more of collection of all of these different traditions, all within the Abrahamic faith so far, and all merged into one and explained the best they could. So we will see. Hopefully, our friend Shai will come over and actually explain others that he has actually researched in detail, and he can show the sources where they come from, and then you at home decide. What I would say as well is that the fact, if we see these stories like life of Adam and Eve, and then we find that the story in the Quran, it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the story that people were actually reading to the guy who started to write the Quran. It's like that is a little bit of a jump. The same with these stories about the Talmud. It doesn't mean they are in a, say, in a marketplace or in a town square, and there is some guy in there just reading the Talmudic story to the crowd. It doesn't mean that. It means that the stories would have originated from those sources. Now, how they got from that position, from that place, into the ears of the guy who started to write the Quran, or the number of writers before they put everything together, that's something that we will still have to discuss. But hopefully, one of the pieces of information that we are going to learn through this exercise is where were these stories actually being told. For example, if we learn that the sleepers in the cave was only ever written in Aramaic, it's like, okay, so all of this has to be in the north, because the people in the south would not have actually understood that. However, if it's a story that was written in every single possible language, we cannot really narrow it down in any possible manner. It could have been spoken by traders everywhere. So even though it seems like they've taken these stories directly from the Talmud or this apocryphal, I would say let's actually bear in mind that that may have been the original source, but how it got to the guy who wrote it, there could be a gap, and hopefully we will understand it. But at least by understanding where the stories came from, we can actually have a look at the originals, and people, particularly Kash and I, we can actually see what language was actually being used, and maybe a particular keyword in those passages, either from the Talmud or the apocryphal story, maybe that keyword happens to be in the Quran and happens to be hidden. So it can help us understand how the language in the Quran actually evolves. So it's a very important piece of information, but I just want to make it clear that it is not that clear cut as though people were just like grabbing sections of, for example, the Talmud and this apocryphal story and put them together. Maybe there is a few steps from the stories being told to the public to then someone compiling them, and hopefully we get there soon enough and understand what happened.
But JC, there's a little detail here. It would have been very discouraged or basically non-existent for, well, it depends what you mean by public, right? But like, no one would be teaching Talmudic stories in the town square. That would have been totally unacceptable because it's considered esoteric knowledge. You don't just go around telling it to everyone, right? So that would be very weird for this type of literature to find its way into this text unless there was some sort of byway. So that's interesting.
Like
Because
play,
it would have been
like
weird.
a play, like a play that we've discussed before, because that is Joe's like thesis as to how that would work. So if you'd like to actually explain maybe to people like how that would work.
Well, the play idea. Okay, the play idea is that, well, it's the thesis that many, probably not all of the segments of the text were not intended to be read as theological material, but rather to be presented as a play. What comes to mind are things like Solomon and the Ant. To me, that seems like it would have been performed in front of a bunch of children. So, like this, the thesis about the whole play idea may hold weight in particular segments of the Quran.
Yeah, there were stories actually all the way into the Middle Ages and actually after, where people would go to see these troubadours, these people who would travel city to city and they would tell stories. The very good ones, they would actually play an instrument as well if they were very talented, but they would actually act out or do something because there wasn't Netflix back in those days. So you had to do something. This was as well a form of education and also entertainment. So somebody would actually come from a particular tradition and they would do something, but instead of simply just talking everyone's ears off, they would try to act it out because it's actually a lot more interesting, and then probably you get an extra coin or two. So we don't know how these stories would have actually moved around, but there are some stories, like Cash said, that it would actually fit the context of being in a play. For me, the ones that talk, let's say, like, oh, prophet, maybe if you divorce your wives, maybe God will give you better wives. And it's like that actually sounds like a jester talking to a king, making fun, and people have a laugh, just like you see in the movies, right? So
Yeah.
there are some sections that you could actually see that being spoken out loud in the real world and even acted out with different characters. Hence why the verse wouldn't actually have a lot of detail, because you can see with your own eyes what people are doing. So I think there might be some of those things within the book.
Right.
Great. So uh, this was it. Today was going to be a very short session, although we have actually spoken quite a bit and we had technical difficulties. So thank you for bearing with us through those difficulties, which it happens every once in a while. Is first world problems. If you like this sort of material, please make sure that you click the like button and subscribe and all of those things. That comment in the comment section after the stream if you know other apocryphal stories, other Talmudic stories, and so on. And hopefully, when we have our friend Shai from You Reads Quran, make sure you go and you check out his channel. When he's over here, he will present other stories, and hopefully, we'll understand the Quran better. If you know stories, let us know in the comment section, as I was saying, and we can actually discuss those with him. Maybe there are some that he knows. We can actually present them there, or we can at least explore them. In the end, we want to know where all of this came from, and it takes a village. Would you agree, Cash?
Yeah. And JC, what do you think we present what the Monday stream will be?
Uh, let's 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 just say, if we don't change our minds about the stream on Monday, it will be very cool. It will be different to some of the things we've done before. It's going to be very educational and it's going to be fun without even mentioning any of the topics. Would you like to say
Okay.
anything as well, like vague, without giving
Well,
anything away?
I think we can just say that we're gonna introduce to the audience a multi-part series where we go through what we call the Quranic part.
And hopefully that will go well. So we're still working on that. We are not going to do this series like we did the very first 10 sessions where they were just all themed. These ones are going to be themed, but they will probably not be one after another until we've done all of them. Maybe we'll do one, two, three, and then have a break, and then be inviting people on the channel as well to talk about other discoveries or other things that we are doing. So it will most likely be a bit more spread out, but yes, make sure that you are back on Monday. Hopefully, we have that live stream already ready, because it will be a lot of fun and you are going to see things that will really, really surprise you. So, um, any final words, Cash, before we call it a day?
We can call it a day. I'll just add that it really is like it'll shock you in a way which I don't think it's like it'll shock you in a way that no other Quranic material or polemics or anything like that has, because it does something that I would say hasn't been done before.
Yeah, with higher production value as well, a little bit. We're trying. Okay, so thank you everyone for watching. Thank you for actually being here. Cash, do you want to say any goodbye words before we switch off?
Thank you all. Thank you very much. And we would love to see you also on Monday, the same time.
Great. Thank you all for being here. God bless you all. And we'll see you next time, hopefully on Monday, to discuss something really, really interesting. Until then, stay well. See you soon. Bye-bye.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie! 26 different Qurans!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
As promised, I will give you more than 20 reasons why I left Islam in this video.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this Injil?